I'm going to talk to you about two things, basically. One is religion, and one is AI, and how they correlate, basically. And this website, as you can see, Dawson.ai, is the place where you can go for further information. So as you study the evolution and history of religion, you are going to notice, and you have already noticed, that there is this element of violence that has been created by religions, and unfortunately, up until today, it's still going on. And also, when you think about AI, and especially the recent developments of AI technologies, as they encroach on our lives, there is some element of dehumanizing us and creating some separation among us, which itself can lead into intolerance and possibly violence. All right. And this is not just about some facts to know, but it's about our responsibility, because we can mitigate the problems. And to the extent that we can ameliorate the situation, to the extent that we have the power and ability, we are also responsible. So I want to share with you an experience, a personal experience that I had, and that was a Bible study. So I started this in 2011, and it took me 2 years to complete. And I basically read 2 pages a day. All right, so it was a massive project. And I realized at the beginning that I'm embarking on a very long journey. So I paused at the beginning, and I asked myself about my intention, right? So what kind of attitude, what kind of mindset do I want to have when approaching this book, this Bible book? And am I going to go looking at it as an outdated book full of contradictions and fables? I decided that I'm going to approach the Bible in the same way that I would approach the Quran. And just for your reference, I did have an upbringing in a Muslim family and a Muslim education. So I was pretty well versed with the Quran and had a lot of respect for it. So I said, you know what, I'm going to treat the Bible in exactly the same way, because that is what it was intended to be. So I'm going to look at it. I want this book to teach me wisdom for life. I want it to show me the light of truth. I want it to guide me towards liberation. And it's quite interesting that that's pretty much what I got. Whatever you go in for, that's what you get. Your mindset, your orientation plays a tremendous role in what you gain from your experience, right? So maybe that can be a first observation to keep in mind. So this ended up to be a very transformative process. It made me understand the Quran better, which is very interesting. I thought that I already knew the Quran, but I actually deepened my understanding a lot. And one of the aspects was it expanded my horizon, and it set the weights and priorities in place. Where are the emphases? Where is the core as opposed to the peripheries? All right. Now, from the beginning, as I started to read the book of Genesis, I actually noticed a lot of familiar concepts. Right. So I know the Quran enough to be able to tell. If you give me any statement, I can tell you if it has a similar counterpart in the Quran or not. All right. So that's kind of like an advantage that I had from my upbringing. And I started reading the Bible. I noticed these similarities, and I wrote them down. So I started writing them down. And at the beginning, it was a mess. It was just dumping stuff in a file. But later on, I created an Excel map, and that itself took about several months to develop the Excel file. So I'm gonna show you the Excel file that shows this map. All right. So what you see here is this is basically just quoted stuff. So from the book of Genesis, in the first column you have the verses from the Bible, and in the second one you have verses from the Quran. All right, and it goes on and on and on and on. I think it's really long actually. It's like almost 4,000 verses. And then I also made the other way around. This itself took a lot of time. It's not as easy to do this manually. So again, from the Quran, from the very first chapter, I found the similar verses in the Bible and put them in as a map. And again, this also is about like 3,000 verses there. So this is a relatively massive project that took quite a long time. After finishing this, I shared this Excel file with some friends. And they were quite impressed. And one of them told me that, hey, you have to make an application, a cell phone application with this. And I was like, what are you talking about? I don't have any resources. I don't know anyone. There's no way I'm going to do this. So I let the idea pass. And but it was interesting that the idea actually remained at the back of my head. I didn't have anyone. I had no idea how I could do it. I knew that this would be kind of useful, but I'd like to share it, but I didn't know how to. And it's interesting that life brings about those things that you need, the right people. So around 2016, I met this software developer who seemed to be the right guy. So I talked to him about it, and he agreed to work on this project. So I got him involved in the project, and that is where the idea of Bible Quran link comes. That's the cell phone application, which I'm going to show you. Actually, I'm going to show you the end product, and later on I'm going to let you guys play with it. I'm going to tell you how you can access it and play around with it. So let me see if I can share it with you. This is how the application looks. Very simple. You have the Quran and you have the Bible, and you have just some settings, but you can simply pick one of the two books and find a verse in it. So I'm going to do it both ways. Let's go to the Bible. Does anyone know where are the 10 commandments in the Bible? You can use the mic if you want. No? Well, there are two places with the 10 commandments. One of them is the book of Exodus, and the other one is Deuteronomy. So I'm going to go just to Exodus. It's Exodus 20. So I'm going to scroll down to chapter 20. And from the very beginning, we get the 10 commandments, right? So, and God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God. And you can see on the top right corner of each verse, you can see a sign which indicates that there is a connection there. So any verse with that kind of symbol, you can click on it and it would go on to the Quran, basically, right? And this goes on. If you go on with the 10 commandments, you see some of them which are a little bit more famous, like this one: honor your father and mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your gift is given you. You know, you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, and so forth, right? So let's click on the one with father and mother and see what you get in the Quran. So in the Quran, you can see on the top that there are 12 verses. So the first one is from chapter 2, verse 83. When we took a pledge from the children of Israel, saying, worship no one but Allah, do good to your parents, relatives, orphans, and the needy, speak kindly to people, maintain the prayer, and give the zakat, you turn away, except a few of you, and you were disregardful, right? And you can look at other verses. I think this one is actually pretty. This one is pretty accurate. This is verse 151 of chapter 6. I will recount what your Lord has forbidden you, that you shall not ascribe any partners to him. So you get the first commandment here. You shall be good to the parents. So you get this commandment, and it keeps going on. And if you look at the verses further, you can get more. So later on I'm gonna let you guys take a look at these things and how they're related. Let me go to the Quran and show you another direction of this. So the most remarkable verse in the Quran, in my opinion, is the verse of light. Does anyone know where is the verse of light? It would be in the chapter of light. So that's chapter 24. And it's verse 35. So we're going to scroll down. Here we go. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. The parable of his light is a niche wherein is a lamp. The lamp is in a glass, the glass, as it were, a glittering star, lit from a blessed olive tree, neither eastern nor western, whose oil almost lights up, though fire should not touch it. Light upon light. Allah guides to his light whomever he wishes. Allah draws parables for mankind, and Allah has knowledge of all things. This very first sentence, that Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth, this I find to be quite a remarkable definition of God. And what I find it to be quite interesting about it is that it's a very impersonal view of God. So you get this kind of view of God in the Eastern traditions a lot. In this verse can be a relevant connection to Eastern traditions as well. So for instance, in Hinduism, there is the idea of Satchit Ananda, existence, consciousness, and bliss. And the light metaphor does a pretty good job at representing all three of them: the Sat, the Chit, and the Ananda. Now, if we click on the icon connecting this to the Bible, it would show anything that's related to any part of the verse. And these relations come at different levels. Some of them are more direct, some of them are a little bit less direct, some of them are a similarity, some of them are different. So I'm going to just to show you how diverse these things can be. You can see the first one is from the book of Judges. It says, next the tree said to the fig tree, come and be our king. Right? So in the Quran, there was this idea of the olive tree, and here we get the fig tree, both being praised. And you look at the second one from the second book of Samuel. You, Lord, are my lamp. You, Lord, turns the darkness into light. Right? And if you move down to the New Testament, there are a couple of very relevant verses too. So from the Gospel of John, we have, I have come into the world as a light, so that no one who believes in me should stay in darkness. So that's from the Gospel of John. And then from the first epistle of John, we have light and darkness, sin and forgiveness. This is the message we have heard from him and declare to you. God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. Anyway, if we were to put what I would say is that this whole process took years to do. It was very painstaking and very costly. So here's where AI can come in and help us. So when it comes to AI, there is this concept called machine learning. And machine learning is, I'm going to give you a very crude simplification of it. And if you want more accuracy, you have to talk to a couple of our good colleagues here, like Lopan and Carl, who are more experts. But basically, machine learning is kind of like this. You feed in a picture of a dog to the computer and say, this is a dog, right? And then you do another dog, a different breed, a different color, and say, this is a dog, right? And then it eventually, with practice, with more and more data, it picks up the pattern. So that if you feed in a picture that it hasn't seen before, it can say, oh, there's a dog here, and there's a person here, and whatever. Kind of like how a child learns. How you guys learn to this dog is the dog is that your parents showed you different dogs, and then at some point you could tell it yourself, right? And this has many different applications. So for instance, in medicine, in medical diagnosis, they feed in multiple cases of different diagnoses with the symptoms and the actual illness, and the cure for it. And after enough data, the machine, you need to have the algorithm, of course, the machine can deduce for new cases. So it can really save a lot of time. And in legal advice also. So object recognition is one example of it. What would be my dream is that instead of me going through this personally and do all of that painstaking job, is to develop some form of machine learning where I could do maybe 1 or 2 chapters, give the data to the computer, and the computer can generate this for other texts. There is a lot to explore out there, a lot of these links, and it's very eye-opening. It's the experience that I had was so strong that I feel like it would be a great contribution if we can have machine learning facilitate this. And it doesn't have to be just religious. It could be with other philosophies, with other schools of thought. Let me just to give more context to this concept of intolerance and how it is related to intolerance. Let me just touch on a couple more things which are kind of important. All right. So here's this idea that the seed of intolerance is this word "the." Now, what do I mean by that? Consider these statements. The Quran is the highest guidance, or the Bible is the eternal universal truth. And you can, instead of the Quran or a Bible, you can put in anything there. You can put in any kind of worldview or school of thought. You could put in secularism, atheism, whatever. Doesn't matter. The idea is that, think about the implication of these statements. These, by the way, are statements which are pretty common among the followers of pretty much any school, of any religion. The problem with with this kind of notion, with this kind of mindset, is that it's exclusivist. It's absolutist. So what it means is that, think about this. If somebody believes that their book, their religion, their tradition is the highest guidance or the eternal universal truth, what does that mean? What does this mindset, the mindset, how does it affect our ability and willingness to accommodate other views and values which oppose the ones that we hold? Right? This is where you can see where the idea of the seed of intolerance comes in. Because what it means is that what I have got is applicable to all people, everywhere, under all circumstances, in all times. And this, by the way, reminds me of a nice quote that I actually learned from your teacher, Professor Freud, that tyranny is the deliberate removal of nuance. Right? That's what it is. Right? This is where you get intolerance when you have these generalizations. Right? So. Now, one thing also to note here is that when we talk about violence and intolerance, you have to keep in mind that the violence and intolerance are the symptoms. If we start fighting violence with violence, then we've already lost the game. We shouldn't, it's not smart to treat the symptoms. We must target the root causes, right? That would be the seeds. And the way I'm presenting it here is that the root cause, that seed is that D. So the solution would be let the D dissolve. And how would the D dissolve? If you want to go to the roots, what I would say is that this idea of exposure to the guidance and truth that is found in other traditions, different from the ones that one is used to, that can be very eye-opening. That can expand one's horizon. All right. And I think if you think practically how we can develop that, I would say that here is where you can have machine learning or AI tremendously help us. This, by the way, as I said, you are the AI generation. You are growing up with these things. So your responsibility is to be informed users of these technologies, not blind users. And possibly at some point to become the producer of constructive AI technologies. Because there are a lot of things, I don't know, there are these violent video games that are around. You can be a little bit more nuanced in terms of your usage of AI. And as I said, life is going to bring about on your way the opportunities that you need. The important thing is to take those steps that you can, and the rest is going to unfold for you. So I'm going to share a few resources in the chat box with you, but that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, I would love to hear them, or any comments that you'd like to share.
I think it's a very interesting thing what you did to compare both of them, because there's like a lot of sometimes there's between Christians and Muslims, everyone tries to which one is the right religion, but when what you did actually linking them together, finding comparisons, I think that was really great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aliyah. Anybody have any other questions or comments? Dr. Polikoff.
Just Greg. No. So, is this what you've talked about today? This is an example of what some people call digital humanities, right?
I haven't heard of that term. Could you explain to us?
Oh, well, I was just because I just wanted to situate it into a broader context. So my comment isn't so much about the specific content, which I also think is really interesting, but well, digital humanities, I don't know much about it, I'm just learning, but is how to use artificial intelligence and other algorithm-driven, well, I guess that is artificial intelligence, pardon me, it's early in the morning, algorithms to perform comparative research on different texts, etc. And I was just wondering, if you saw any future research that you might do, and maybe you could explain what it might be.
Based on your description, yeah, that would be a very close connection. It is what it is comparative text. So, for instance, what I would say is for instance, I've been actually following this Bible study with other texts. So, for instance, the Hindu texts and the Buddhist texts. And then it's still a work in progress, and so it's nowhere close to being anything of use right now. But one could also think of non-religious material. Let's say Plato, for instance. So Plato would be a very good source where you get a lot of wisdom, and it can be very eye-opening to see that to see this richness of teachings. Or other schools, other philosophies, even myths, some mythologies of ancient Greece, Egypt, India, China. Some of these are very rich, and those can also be very insightful. So I guess part of your question also, Greg, is so maybe there are two applications here. One is the academia. So the scholars, they would definitely this would be applicable to them because they would like to know the roots of every kind of text. Where did the idea come from? Where are the influences and all that stuff? So at that level, we're talking about expert level. But then also for the general public, what I have right now is more like a general public, general audience kind of thing, right? So it's a macro kind of usage. So at that level also it can be very useful. So maybe those are the two channels where it can be specialized.
Can I ask you one more follow-up question?
Yeah.
How did you choose which versions of the Bible and the Quran, like which translations to work with? Because my humble knowledge of religious studies, you know, when I've read different versions of the Bible and some other texts, when I've taught them, especially at Dawson, is I've noticed there's a huge difference between the words that are used in the translations, and sometimes in class we even talk about how X translation and B would give us really different interpretations.
That's an awesome question. Well, for the Quran, I can manage the Quran with the original Arabic, so I don't need to use a translation. With the Bible, I decided to read the King James translation, which took a little while to get used to it, but after that, it can be actually enjoyable. Partly because it is actually the most read and the most published one. But I also checked commentaries. I checked other translations. So this is a very good question because all of these things can be controversial in terms of their meaning based on the translation. And every group, every kind of faction have their own preferred translation, and they can disagree. And they say, "Oh, you got it wrong," and this is what's saying. This is the message. This is not the message. So what I would say is that because we don't. So first of all, machine learning can help here also because we cannot possibly learn all of the original languages and read all of the text on our own. That would take like probably more than a lifetime. But if you have machine learning, then that can kind of help the language barrier. But more than that, what I would say, based on my experience, when it comes to these ambiguous texts or controversial possibilities, what I found is that reading two translations can help a lot. So that's what I tried with the Tao Te Ching, which has a lot of translations and a lot of variety. And when I read, I think I read 3 translations. It's a short book, so you can have 3 different translations. And when you read that, you can easily tell what are the verses where the meaning is very solid and clear, and what are the verses where things could be questionable. At least you would know where are the points of controversy so that you don't capitalize on it too much. You don't take it maybe you don't invest too much opinion on it. But having 2 translations can help a lot. It's kind of like having 2 eyes, which affects our vision a lot compared to only 1 eye or 2 ears with our hearing. So that's a practical advice that I would give for people who are using translations and they want to do a serious work. I think just reading 2 translations can go a far way in getting into accuracy.
Any other questions or comments for Ahmad? It's a very interesting project, Ahmad. I appreciate you said that eventually with the use of machine learning, you would be looking at influences. We know that the Egyptian tradition, Egyptian Book of the Dead, you mentioned the 10 Commandments, and we can see significant influence, potential influence from the Egyptian Book of the Dead on the 10 Commandments, or the influences of Zoroastrianism, or Sumerian religion or Akkadian religion on different stories or myths from the Abrahamic faiths. So I find that interesting that you're going to be looking into that in the future. I find it interesting also that as an economist, you're looking to find peace in the world through religion. And as a religious studies scholar, I'm looking to find peace in the world through economics. So it makes for very interesting conversations. Greg, how are you looking for peace in the world?
Well, I think right now I'm looking for peace in the world of economics as well, because I'm a little behind on my life savings. But well, no, I guess I'm kind of like you guys. I think that reading stuff in religious studies and literature and philosophy is you'd be exposed to a really wide variety of ideas, and I think that in itself is kind of a step towards understanding and peaceful thinking. I know that sounds a little corny, like let's all read and get to know each other and it'll be peaceful. But I do think there is something said for that. For example, I'm sure in this class you have people of lots of different backgrounds, but reading through all these texts, you're doing sort of sort of what Ahmad is doing in his text, sort of finding, you know, these points of intersection and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Ahmad, imagine like, imagine if Joseph Campbell would have had like access to these algorithms, or Jung, right? They would have went crazy because they would have analyzed not just like a few hundred texts to come up with the idea of the collective unconscious, but they could have fed the entirety of the internet into it. Anyway.
Fantastic. Certainly open-mindedness, being open to different interpretations, different perspectives, certainly opens one's mind and hopefully also one's heart. Very, very good point. Thank you very much, Greg.
I just want to say, first of all, thank you very much for your presentation. I very much enjoyed it. And I was wondering about the seed of intolerance part and the whole and we've talked about it before in class, the idea that to believe your own belief system above others is like, as you said, your quote, you learned it from good old Dr. Freud. And I was wondering, how does one who believes in a faith exclusively without using the term the? So if you believe, for example, that Christianity is the correct belief system, how do you keep yourself from kind of involving those other faiths in the idea that, I'm trying to word this in a way that is better than what I'm trying to say. Because if you believe that your faith is not the supreme faith and that it is among the other faiths, how does that manage and the whole keeping the faith as it is versus, I don't know what I'm trying to get at here.
No, I totally hear you. You're pointing at a very important thing, and that is, if the founders of a religion and those who are founding any school, if they want to be too open and say, hey, you know what, this is just one option among all other options, you're not going to sell your product like that. That's not the attitude. So you don't get that from inside the tradition, right? That's the whole point. So here's the thing. Imagine a very large, tall building, and you're on the sidewalk next to this building. As long as you're right next to this building, you cannot see the whole building unless you cross the road to the other side and look at it from a distance. It's only then that you can see the whole building. So what I would say is, you have to speak to the right incentive. So I think that's what you're talking about. Like, how do you fix these incentives? So the incentive is that for the person who is committed to the Bible, if they want to have a deeper understanding of the Bible, it would really enrich their understanding if they cross the road to the other side and they look at it from a little distance, right? So that I think would be able to sell it, to say, hey, Kai, just here's a nice experience, and it is meant to deepen your engagement with your own tradition, and it does. But as a byproduct, it also creates tolerance, right? So you can see it like that.
Thank you very much. That was very well put.
On that note, I had a question as well. About I just wanted to know, how do you preserve objectivity if we want to get rid of the? Is there supposed to be like a standard basis of knowledge that people follow, or is it more to get rid of the you have to actively look at the things that oppose your view?
Okay, I don't understand. What do you mean by to get rid of the you have to look at the things that actively oppose your view?
Well, I'm just wondering, to get rid of the I assume the would be like an objective truth, because I mean, obviously everyone believes that their objective truth is the truth, but it isn't. But for us to all get along, I feel like there has to be a common basis of knowledge that we can share. So to get rid of the would that mean to be getting rid of objectivity, or would that, like, I'm just a bit confused.
Right. Yes, yeah, I see your point. I think that partly was beyond my expertise, to be honest. You're talking about the idea of relativism, and if there is any absolutes at all, or if everything is just comparative and we have absolutely no basis for any comparison, I don't think that's a nuanced statement itself. It's a little bit beyond my expertise. What I can say probably is this. I would point out that to the difference between saying that, let's say, the Bible is true and the Bible is the truth, right? When somebody says the Bible is true, they are expressing a personal experience. They were engaged with this book and they found some truth, some guidance in it, and they're expressing their experience. And that is valid. That is a valid statement. But to say that the Bible is the truth, to the extent that it has a bearing on other people, then that is not justifiable. So this doesn't remove us, this doesn't put us into relativity. This is just about being nuanced. This is exactly about not making a claim for which you don't have any evidence. You have evidence for that part which you experience personally. You don't have evidence for how applicable this is to other people in other circumstances. So all that's going on is that removing the is basically being more objective, actually. So in a way, I would say that there isn't necessarily any contradiction between having some form of objectivity and removing the.
Okay, thank you.
You guys are a tough crowd. Yes, Carl.
They're the best and the brightest, Ahmed.
I just want to make sure if any other student would like to ask a question before I do. I would have a question / comment, but
yes, I have a question.
Yes.
I'm not a student in this class, but I'm pursuing the Peace Certificate, so that's why I'm here. So I apologize if I seem to be lacking knowledge that the rest of the class has about this subject. But I was curious if you found, and I don't expect that you would have done as lengthy a research into this as you have done with the Quran and the Bible, but for instance, did you look for parallels in other, perhaps other pantheons or story-based religions like the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, or as well as the, oh, forgive me, the Judaic sacred text? The Torah, I believe. And I was wondering if you have done that research, because it just real quick after you posted the App Store link, I checked it, and there's something else that says that links the Bible, the Quran, and science. It's a separate project that I thought was interesting as well. So I was just wondering how common are looking into these parallels, and I just think it's wonderful as a comment that people are finally starting to look into this more and more publicly. But I'd love to hear if you've done further research into other sacred texts or other religions.
Yes, thank you. Yes, absolutely. So first of all, as you know, the Bible has the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, and the Hebrew Bible is the Judaic text. So not in the same order, but it is the same text. So this does unite all the Western religions. After I finished my Bible study, I actually continued my religious scriptural studies. So I actually did develop, I haven't developed as much, but I did look into the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, the Buddhist text. And let me just show you what I have right now. It's kind of like in its very inception, it hasn't evolved as much, partly because the similarities between Eastern and, so this is what I have from the Bhagavad Gita. So I have these, these are the Hindu texts, and you have the Quran on the side. Part of it is because the connections aren't as, so these are the Gita texts. The connections aren't as strong, I would say, as you see between the Bible and the Quran. In the Bible and the Quran, it's almost verbatim. In the other texts, it's still there. But it's partly because the connections aren't that strong, and partly because I'm not done. So I would like to do the Vedas and all that. And this is where I really need machine learning, because the Vedas are long, man. It's really long. So it would take forever to do this if I were to do it alone. But ideally, I would like to do that. About the Greek myths, for instance, I see the value of that, and I have actually looked into it, but I've never looked at it as a comparative study. So I haven't developed anything like that. I think that would be a little bit a second stage that I'm not at it right now.
Thank you.
Carl?
Yes, my friend, unless our time is up. So Ivan, tell me.
Go ahead, ask your question, sir. Let's hear your question.
Okay, sure. Because it might be slightly long, but I'll try to make it a bit short. But it's on the wonderful quotation, actually, that you've taught, Ahmad. So tyranny is the deliberate removal of nuance. I just love it. And I find it so meaningful for so many reasons. So let me just, unpack part of what I believe to be the meaning of this quotation. So it seems to me, Ahmad, that to foster tolerance towards different ideologies, could be religious ideologies or any other ideologies, we have to expose ourselves deliberately to arguments that we might not be familiar with, that are uncommon to us, or that we may have any preconceived notions towards, right? So in that regard, I think it's extremely valuable to point out the common ground between so many passages of the Christian Bible and the Quran. So I applaud you for that. I think it's very valuable stuff. And my comment, which will be followed by a question, is, and that's for especially the students in your class, Ivan, who may make heavy use of YouTube. My hunch is that the overwhelming majority of your students spend a fair amount of time on YouTube. And just to point out that one of the most influential AI systems that is part of our daily life would be the recommendation AI system designed by YouTube. Statistically, 70% of what we watch on YouTube was recommended by this AI system. And typically what they do is that they're trying to model what we like, dislike, what we're familiar with, and they're trying to, in a way, confirm our already existing biases. So, this YouTube's AI system, in the end, creates an echo chamber. So if ever you're well versed in the Christian Bible and you want to hear Christian preachers and Christian arguments, that's what YouTube will keep, pitching at you, will keep recommending to you, and that's what you'll keep consuming. So rarely will you get the opportunity to hear other points of view, other religious worldviews, and so on. So again, that's why I think it was wonderful that that Ahmad has done this exercise today. And so that's my comment, is let's be careful with the end result of these recommendation AI systems, because in the end, they might actually reduce tolerance because they create an echo chamber, which tells us what we already believe in. So then we might only hang out virtually with people who already agree with us, as opposed to seeking out different points of view. And academia, and that's my question for Ahmad, academia, the way I understood it, was partly designed so that our students would be exposed to different points of view, so that we could bring some nuance about, different notions that we held dear and so on, even if they're not comfortable, right? So the idea for us is to explore uncomfortable or inconvenient truth, so to speak, right? So my question to you, Ahmad, is I'd like to know your thoughts about the so-called cancel culture, which seems to be taking over some North American university campuses when there's an opposing point of view, a person representing a very different and controversial point of view is actually unable to express her thoughts because of, let's say, extremely aggressive protesters. So what are your thoughts about the so-called cancel culture? Should we allow radically different, even if controversial, points of view on university campuses? Or are you rather in favor of the so-called cancel culture that says, well, there's some stuff that our students should simply not be exposed to, some arguments that they should not even be able to analyze and evaluate? So what would be your thoughts about that, please?
I think that's an amazing point. It really ties to what I said at the end about this idea that in the quotation marks, instead of the Quran or the Bible, you can literally put anything, including the secular education system that we have, because that's where it's coming from. So these seeds of intolerance could creep into literally anywhere. So that's what you're pointing about. In terms of academia, I'm a very staunch proponent of having a total freedom of speech, because academia is the place for it. Even during the Vietnam War, which was very, very controversial, and the intellectuals were very opposed to it. There was this presentation at the University of Chicago in the US, where one of the companies who was a contractor of this war, and very, very notorious, very hated by everyone, was supposed to come and give a talk. And because of like security issues and things like that, they were like wisely in a way, they wanted to cancel the talk, but some of the, I'm not going to name them, but some of the people that I really admired, they actually pressed that this should go on and should actually happen, and it did happen. And it kind of like speaks to the idea that if we value the freedom of speech, we have to be willing to let the opponent also to come in and talk. It's going to be very difficult. And that's why I think the application of this, what I said about this exposure to the others, or crossing the street to the other side, can have a lot of application regardless of where one is and where is one field of practice.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you, Carl. Ian, do you have a comment?
First, I just wanted to, I don't know if you can see this book, Ahmad, but this is for you.
Okay, sure.
Economics as Religion.
Wow.
Economics and Religion.
No, Economics as Religion.
As religion.
So obviously into your interests here. No, I didn't really have a question, but I noticed that I think that your project is fascinating. And I think if we're looking at sort of large scale or macro comparisons, then it makes a lot of sense. But I noticed in your app that you had, for instance, the Arabic text for the Quran. But did you go into, especially if you're looking at Eastern texts, I know my own experience with the Vedas, for instance, like I started learning Sanskrit and then realized, I think, anyway, whatever. Yeah. So like, this is a massive project. And so the problem ends up being for literalists or scripturalists, or those people who argue for a kind of fine level interpretation, that if we're comparing works in translation, then we're getting this kind of macro level, which I think is your project. So that makes sense. But I wondered if you had any intention, maybe, I don't know, through machine learning to teach yourself Hebrew and Greek.
I would love to. One problem is that for the Hebrew Bible, the Hebrew exists. For the New Testament, what we have is Greek, which is not the language in which it was written. So that's gone forever. Now, but that's not the problem. I don't think that. I think there's a solution. When I read the Tao Te Ching has more than 80 English translations. 80, and it's a small book. It's one of the most translated books, and they can vary quite a lot. And the Chinese is kind of like it's a classical Chinese which can be read from one direction or the other direction, and this way and that way. There's no this and that. Anyway, but what I found very useful is reading even just two translations of any text can help remove almost all of the controversy. At least it shows you where are the controversies. Okay, just two. It's kind of like when you have two cameras, which give you the three-dimensional, and you have the two eyes, right? That can help a lot. So for people, so the ideally, if you can have machine learning, that can be a great help. But otherwise, for people who don't have access to the original language, reading two translations, I would say, especially like two different types, can go pretty far in getting an accurate understanding of that text.
Cool.
I have a question about that actually, really quick. Sorry, I know the time. I just want to know how exactly machine learning could help with that kind of app, just because I feel like that's the kind of thing where you really need that human analysis of it, just because I know that machine learning, like machines can't assign value to their data, right? If I, as you said, if I were feeding pictures of a dog to a computer, different pictures, we don't know what common feature the machine is looking at to say that this is a dog. We just know that, okay, now it can see what's a dog. We don't know why. So I'm just wondering how machine learning would be able to like say that two things are comparable or the same when it doesn't exactly know what these things are.
Yeah, I don't have the technical knowledge of that, but it's a little bit more detailed than that. So there is algorithm that goes with the data. It's not just data. There's data plus algorithm, and so basically in those first stages, if you want to say, it is that you have to give a little bit more instructions to the machine. Like for instance, in terms of having the shape or the ear, the eyes, these are the features that are there. So it's a little bit more than just saying that this is a dog. So, but Laurent, maybe if you can enlighten us on that.
Yes, I just wanted to kind of add a little bit of context there, because when we're talking about machine learning, it's a very good question, because what you asked, Isabella, in a sense, like how can it, in quote, make sense? And we have lots of automatic, I'm not talking about AI, whatever, but just basically algorithms, which are going to be able to take the context, let's say a sentence from the Bible, and and that's the beauty of using a machine, is basically it will allow you to compare with the whole complete current text automatically. And basically here we're talking about context. Of course, both of them will be, let's suppose, English. And by learning, you will be able to let's say, make a difference between, let's say, the first occurrence. Basically, what the machine will try to do is trying to find a match between two sentences or two words, perhaps. The fig tree, and you see that's the stupidest example. Basically, there will be a fig tree in the Bible, and then the machine would say, oh, here there's a sentence in the Quran which contains a fig tree, so there is a match, which is completely stupid because, of course, the context is not there. But using the machine, it will allow you to kind of refine the whole thing. And of course, there will be lots of trial and errors. But if you use enough, you see, for I would say simply context, you will be able to find probabilities saying this sentence from the Bible has a probability of 70% of being close to whatever it comes from the, or whatever text, right, coming from the Quran. And that's the way it's going to evolve. And of course, once you get the highest probabilities, you will have also to validate the fact that, yes, let's say this sentence of the Bible is talking about the truth of whatever, or the eternal whatever, and it will be able to kind of course, kind of find a probability in the Quran. And of course, here, what is extremely important there is you will have to, as Ahmad said, when you read it, you as a human, you make the correspondence. Basically, you see, it's not a word by word correspondence, because the whole, let's say the whole set of words used by the Quran is, well, not completely, but basically very different from the one in the Bible. But using this refining process, you will be able to get some correspondence. And that's, I guess, what Ahmad is trying to get, is the highest percentage of, let's say, the 10 commandments or whatever inside the Quran, and see if there is one. Because of course, some things are completely different, let's say, doesn't exist or exists differently in the Quran between the Bible. And this is exactly the way the machine is going to be able to kind of, and of course, the nicest part of it is, like, you see, machine learning from, you see, this is completely based, for instance, also for automatic translation. The same concept happens. You see, very often, very soon, and I guess you can already have some application there where you do automatic translation. And that's exactly the same concept. You're talking, let's say, you take Chinese language, which doesn't have the same concept as English, but we're still able to translate Chinese concept, Chinese phrases into English. And that's exactly the same concept, using simply correspondence, and of course enriching a dictionary which has this kind of correspondence between, let's say, an English sentence in the Quran and one which exists in the Bible.
Thank you very much, Laurent, and thank you for everyone who's participated. Victoria, Carl, Ian, thank you very much. There's so much more to be said about this hermeneutics of peace and translation, and it unpacks a whole bunch of different ideas, thoughts, which is fantastic. And I think that's another thing that academia is about opening our minds and considering and looking at different ways of looking at things. Because the more, when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change.